Robert Varady, I'm still angry with you. You haven't come and visited me, but we'll take this. All right, eighth grade, you're leaving the Palm Beach Day School.
Yeah.
From there up till now, and then we'll come back later on and I'll ask you for some reminiscences about the day school, okay?
Okay,
But
sounds
right
good.
now, we want to know all about you. You left eighth grade. Where are you? Ninth grade.
Ninth grade. So I went to Suncoast. I went to the IB program there. My brother had gone south to St. Andrews. I decided to, do the opposite of my brother. Typical younger brother stuff, I suppose. Let's see. It was a great school, great program. Really different experience, kind of. Going to a public school right after going to Palm Beach Day is there's some distance there. And I started to really pick up on. I gained a lot out of your speech class in eighth grade, and I really liked that. Well, not at first. I think I was terrified at first, but over time. And so I really got into debate and into drama a little bit in high school. I think debate was sort of the central experience for me in high school. I got into, there's a couple of different events. There's, a more participatory body. It's called Congress. There's some, like drama where you're acting out, similar to the pieces we did from Shakespeare in your class and in Mr. Bayless's class.
You still remember your 75 lines from Julius Caesar and Cyrano de Bergerac?
I remember putting on the huge nose for Cyrano de Bergerac. Yeah. I don't recall exactly which speech I did. For Shakespeare, I just remember the why man he doth bestride Rome like a colossus. I did that one.
Okay. Do you remember your 10-minute speech final?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I remember, I just remember that class was so much about get back up on the horse. I think I really, had a visceral physical reaction to starting to do, public speeches in your class. I was not a shy kid, but suddenly as soon as there was formality to it, I really kind of got lost over the course of it. But it was almost every day, right? We got up and did at least something short, right? And that was the key.
And there were 6 majors, a 3-minute, a 5-minute, a 6-minute, a 7-minute, and then the 10-minute final. And you're being timed.
Yeah.
Contact test. There was a lot of pressure, I know.
It is. It helped so much though, because my main debate event in high school was extemporaneous, where it's always 7 minutes. You draw a topic a half hour before you have to give your speech. You have 30 minutes to collect your thoughts, and then you're up for 7 minutes. Right. And you're supposed to hit as close to 7 on the dot as you can. So really learning to kind of structure thoughts well and moderate your pace as we did, and just being comfortable in front of the audience as we were in your class. I wouldn't have been able to do that, I think, without you.
So then from Suncoast, then where?
From Suncoast, I went up to Harvard. I went there for a couple of years, not too many. Really, I was all over the place in terms of what I was interested in studying in college. Eventually, I settled on math and economics, and really focused on those two. There was something about the type of thinking and the type of logic that economists really speak to that made a lot of sense to me at the time. And being able to use math as a tool to better understand and formalize that logic, I just found as a really powerful way a lens through which to explore the world, I suppose. And so following college, I went on to work in finance. Back in the mid 2000s, if you had a math degree or an economics degree from a good school, you couldn't throw a stone without sort of landing at an investment bank. And so it felt like, fully half of my graduating class went to one or another of them. So I spent a few years doing that, really deeply in kind of mathematically modeling where stock prices were going, other asset prices were going. I always liked it because it felt really intellectually challenging, like the hardest crossword puzzle I've ever done. But after a couple of years of it, you sort of think, do I just want to be doing crossword puzzles my whole life? So I kind of felt like I didn't really know what was next for me or where I wanted to go. So I decided to kind of hit the reset button by going to business school and seeing what there was else out there to kind of broaden what I would learn at
Where'd
for a
you go
while.
to business school?
I went to Wharton at Penn.
Okay.
And I really got fascinated. This was about the time that Obamacare had been passed and was starting to work its way into the market. And the entire industry was going to be reshaped by introducing technology into how healthcare is delivered, into how doctors connect with and communicate directly with their patients, how the whole way that different organizations, hospitals and nursing homes and physical therapy, how they would all work together, because they were now creating these kind of structures where they would collaborate, whereas previously they all kind of stood alone as their island. And so, I found that a really fascinating area to get into. And so I focused on, healthcare in business school and went into consulting, working with different types of healthcare organizations after business school, whether it was insurance or hospitals or pharmacies or whatever it was, just basically however they were innovating and developing new products, especially in the wake of all this new legislation that was kind of coming out to the market. And then a few years into doing that, my brother, also one of your former students, had decided that he was going to start his own company. He'd been kind of working on an idea, more or less in a garage on his own for a couple of years. And we all kind of thought he was crazy for doing this because you need to be a little bit crazy to go start a new business. But he had this neat idea and was making some really cool eyeglasses. And he asked me to come out and join him. And so for the past 4 years, I've been working with Eric out in California on a complete startup company that's trying to change the way that we use technology to make and sell eyeglasses to people.
So you're still with Eric?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let me ask you this: the health care, etc. Are you familiar with? Do you remember Cyrus Masumi?
Yeah, absolutely.
Company. Are you familiar with that? Okay.
Sure.
Because I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, and I guess he sold the company. I don't know, but it's where you dial a doctor wherever you are, something like that. I think.
ZocDoc, it's a really neat company. I think he was very, very early to this idea of technology products in healthcare, and specifically technology products that are really focused on the patient, focusing the patient, because most technology in healthcare is for the gadget heads, the doctors, for the scientists, right? And so this whole new generation of technology is focused on helping people take control of their own healthcare. It's a whole new field. And so he was at the very beginning of it. It's very cool.
Okay, now give us some personal background. Family. You're married?
I am. Yeah, I got married about a year ago.
About a year ago. Okay.
What can I say? She's a lovely woman. She's French. We met in New York. Actually, we went on our first date a week before I moved from New York to San Francisco.
Good timing.
So yeah, I know. Terrible timing that. And so I had to tell her, like, literally on the date that this is really great. I'm really glad we're meeting, but by the way, I'm leaving town. But we ended up it was such a great week that we kind of spent together. We ended up dating for a year across country, trying to visit each other about once a month. And fortunately it's that time of life where we had a series of weddings that each had to go to, that brought us close enough to see each other. And at the end of the string of weddings, I realized I had no more excuses to go out and visit her. I just had to admit that I really wanted to. And so we said, okay, we're really dating now. And then we got engaged. She moved out to California, and about a year ago, we got married in Paris.
Uh-huh. I'm trying to think. I remember your mom was still teaching here, I guess, when you started dating her.
Yeah, she was.
Keep me up to date on. Well, your mom. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, That's great. That's so great. You were one of the best. You're in my Hall of Fame. You know that academically, personally too.
Personally, I still had a lot of room to grow even as I left your class.
I still remember you're doing. I am a model of a model major general.
Ah, yes. Kept a love for Gilbert and Sullivan all the way through. You know, there was a Gilbert and Sullivan drama troupe at college, and so I went and got involved in one or two of their shows too. Yeah.
What were you in?
Actually, they did a show of the Mikado as well. So remember when we did it in school, we did sort of an abbreviated version of both Penzance and Mikado. Right. But in college, with much more talented people than I only rated getting into the chorus.
I remember a Mikado they had a few years ago, but they had Groucho Marx was in it. Did you ever see that one?
I don't think I ever did.
Groucho
I have to look for that. That's great.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to the day school. When did you start here? What grade?
I started in kindergarten.
In Q, so you were all the way through to 8.
Yeah. I think either my year or the year before me was the first year they stopped doing pre-K, because I know Eric, my brother, did pre-K when he came through, but I only started with you guys at 6 and then all the way through to 8.
So any questions, anything you want to ask about that you remember about your experiences here? Positive, negative, whatever you want to say. Whatever.
You know, I when I kind of look back on education for me, it's really interesting because I feel like you go back, the more you learn and the more you kind of grow as a person, you kind of go back and realize how uncritical maybe you were early on. And, at each stage, you kind of look back and you suddenly view the experiences you've had through a totally different light. I kind of am curious, how have you seen people's own ability to kind of internalize thought and think critically about the world that they're in? Like, have you seen that change over the years? Because teaching people writing really is teaching people to think. And I'm kind of curious how that feels like it's evolved over time.
Well, in Barb, I've gone over this with so many students. We tell our kids, we want you to be critical thinkers. I always get a kick out of a couple years ago when they did the school little booklet they put out for parents and that. And it was over there at the other campus where the lower kids are now. It said, we turn kids out here to be critical thinkers. But, to be a critical thinker, we tell our kids there are 4 things you need, or I tell my kids. I told you people that. I don't know if you remember. You got to be a good reader. If you can't be a good reader, you can't be a critical thinker, right? You got to get that information. You got to be a clear writer, not a great writer, a clear writer. And that's basically what we're interested in the school. That's our priorities here, those 2 things. Number 3, to be a critical, you have to be objective and fair. That's a little tougher because most of that you're going to get at home. Yeah. You're going to get it at home, and we see the results of that, where I have anyway, teaching. And then the 4th thing, to be a critical thinker, another tough one, you're going to have some moral courage, because you're going to find out, and many of the kids who I talked to, especially my 8th graders, they had already experienced this. I says, if you have those 4 criteria, if you're honest, you're going to disagree with your peers at times, with your government at times, with your church and your synagogue at times, with your parents at times. Those things aren't easy. Those things aren't easy in the writing. And that's one advantage, I think, in English. And we did so much writing, but if the kids trust you, they're honest when they're writing. They're honest in most of them, not all of them, but most of them, if they trust you, they're honest. And if you recall, I used to tell, no one reads your papers without your permission. I won't let anyone read Two exceptions. Remember the exceptions?
Is it the same as a psychologist? Like
Pardon?
self-harm and breaking the law, or
Well,
unless it's really, really funny, maybe that one too.
if I see something in that paper that's a danger
Yeah,
to you or someone else, I have to do something about it.
yeah.
Or if they bring in a court order where I must give up the paper, I say, I won't go to jail for you. Those are the only two exceptions. And I've had teachers ask, could I? No. You get the kid's permission. And usually the kid, especially it's good writing, they want, fine. But they have to have that permission. But kids, and how many of them realize, and you see a big change. I used to see a change, kids in 7th grade coming back over that summer to 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
I see a big change there.
What's the nature of that change?
In depth and things like that. That seemed to be a big change. That 1 year, I don't know what it was. I still haven't figured out what it was. But from that 7th grade coming in that summer, I don't know what happens. You have any ideas on that?
Hormones.
The raging hormones. That's probably that's a part of it. That's a part.
I might propose a fifth step for your critical thinking, which is empathy. I think the thing that took me the longest to add to my own kind of intellectual growth was a critical distance from your own experience, to sort of recognize the experience of others, distant from your own, to really challenge what you had taken previously to be true.
You're going to find, you will find how that you said that. That's so funny. Two of your, not classmates, but two of your fellow Palm Beach Day Academy students, I interviewed them already. They're both professors of philosophy. Mm-hmm. One at North Carolina, University of North Carolina, the other one at Wake Forest. Okay. Mm-hmm. And talking about this thing you're talking about, empathy, in the field of philosophy, there's a great deal of controversy going on about, have you ever heard of memes?
Just the social definition, like social media, but you probably mean something else.
Okay, going into Darwinian biology and everything, mm-hmm. It says these memes are the same as genes, only they operate on different things and how they influence. Mm-hmm. And a big thing on this is this whole idea of, how they get in our brains. And the reason, and many of the biologists think that one reason why the human brain is so big, because it had to make room for those memes. And what are memes? They are words. They are anything that's communicated. Mm-hmm. If something I say sticks with you, that's there. That's a meme. Mm-hmm. And of course, the whole thing goes into, Rob, which if you ever get any chance, do some reading on it, because you'll find it interesting. It goes into that whole idea of determinism. Because a lot of these people feel there's no such thing as free will. Mm-hmm. It's an illusion. You're being dictated to by your genes and your memes. And they're the ones that decide what. Anyway, but this...
Bigger thoughts than I'm capable of, I'm sure.
Well, here I am at the age of 88, and I got into this because being isolated at home, television, I didn't watch that much. So I'd start reading, and I got into this. Lisa gave me a book on, actually it was a book on atheism, and it mm-hmm. went into Darwinian theory and everything. So I'm reading the book, but there's so much biology in it, and I'm not much in science or math. Mm-hmm. I'm calling my son-in-law, Richard Wagner. You remember Richard, don't you?
Yeah, of course.
And I'm saying, what's this mean? You got to explain it to me. But it's very interesting. But at my age, at 88, I'm trying to figure things out, and I haven't figured anything out yet.
I mean, the timely application of this, I guess, right? The idea is biological genes, the ones that are better fit to survive, rise to the top. But I don't know that with memes, like with an idea, that's always true, right? you know,
One of the examples they give us a meme.
Sorry.
Da, 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 notes to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
It's a meme that's in so many people, and it's planted up there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be there. So a meme could be anything you write, you read, communication, all that. These are all memes, and they're trying to do one thing like a gene. They want to replicate. They want to get in your brain, and they want to stay there and pass on. It's an interesting, what do you call it? It's very, very controversial, of course.
I bet.
Very controversial.
Yeah, we tend to think of like the, natural selection of genes to be something that's, things that are good for you, right? If they help you survive. But I guess the things that are better at lodging in your head aren't necessarily things that are good for you.
That's true. But there are many, the genes don't necessarily care that what is good for you.
That's true.
All we have to do is look, is see some of the addiction and things like this.
Yeah.
They're not good for you. But the genes aren't interested in being good for you now. All they're interested in is replicating, being passed on to the next generation. Usually what they pass on is good, but not always. Just as these memes are passed on, some ideas in government, in philosophy, and when they're wrong, they're bad, but they got passed on. And they caused a lot of damage.
So because your job is inherently intergenerational, I wonder if you get to see sort of a through line of ideas, from one generation to the next. Probably, I wonder what has surprised you in terms of what stayed consistent, what got passed on.
To see changes. When I first started teaching 63 years ago, 63 years ago, I was teaching a high school class, and I'll never forget, it was election time. And I asked the girls, I said, the question came up, one of the boys had brought up, I said, how many think a woman could be president? And there must have been 15 girls in that class. One put her hand up. All the other 14 said, no, women should. So those ideas like that, you see over the years, ideas are coming out, and some of them are good. Some of them are good. Some of them are dangerous.
Yeah.
Some of them are dangerous.
I mean, does that point to something? Does that point to something that we could or should do as a society better, do you think?
Oh, well, number one, we should educate better. Our public school system, for the most part, is a disgrace. It's a disgrace. What we have, and we're turning out so many of these kids, it's not fair. It's just not fair. I always maintain every kid in the United States should be able to receive the same education that kids get at Palm Beach Day School. Because we have the resources.
Yeah.
But we don't do that, do we? We don't do that. Look at our cities. The school system in our major cities. I mean, it's tragic. It's tragic.
I was having this conversation with my parents a lot when we were just together. There's something positive that's particularly focused in America on meritocracy, right? And I think that's one of the things that we get right. But I think we are so busy convincing ourselves of the myth of meritocracy that we believe outcome is determined by merit just because we sort of want that to be the case. And I think what you're getting to is so much of what looks like sort of self-driven outcome is also sort of societally driven and driven by the resources that are made available to us. And so really, really better understanding, what is meritocracy and not letting the dream of meritocracy get in the way of, more equity is probably the challenge of my generation.
Well, even the whole idea of meritocracy, even in your case, in my daughter's case, who graduated from Harvard. Uh,
It's difficult because as a society, we have a hard time having adult conversations with ourselves about trade-offs, right? And if you really want to get to a place of equity, of meritocracy, of equality, of opportunity, you do have to get away from hoarding and protecting of opportunity, which I think is what the more elite classes have been able to do for themselves. And we like to sort of tell ourselves, oh, we can have both, right? I can both set my kid up for success, and I can have increasing diversity of class, of race, whatever. And at some point, society does need to apply a value system and accept a certain amount of trade-off there.
yeah,
And that's the moral courage for our generation to really tackle.
I think so. I think we saw a beginning in this last year or so among the young, that's a start.
Yeah.
That's a start. It funneled on the race issue, which is necessary, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, the class thing is there. The class thing is there. You know it. You can see it.
Yeah. Well, it's look. My parents both arrived in this country with nothing, right, with the clothes on their back, right, after World War II, with their families, and they had very successful lives. I got to go to Palm Beach Day School. I don't think that pathway is there, for the equivalent kid arriving, in this generation. And we need to reckon with, what makes that so much harder now than.
Well, we have to recognize too, which is another problem of disseminating all these goods. The example you gave, your parents arrived. They might have appeared to have nothing,
mm-hmm.
but they had that family idea. They had the concept of education, things like this, that social organization, that accumulation over generations.
I think that there's, look, what my lived experience, at Suncoast, for example, right, was that there's plenty of families who had the same value system as my own, right?
Okay.
But the guidance counselors in that school, and it's a really good school, were saying that, the pinnacle of achievement by and large was to go to UF, and I don't think there's anything wrong with UF. I don't want to say that, but the point is, the aspirations were not being set externally to what was happening in those families. Those were not the same aspirations that were being communicated to me from the time even I was at Palm Beach Day, right? And so I don't want to say that there's no impact of the family. Obviously there is, but I think societally too, we have, I don't know, I'm getting a lot more political than I think we intended to today. I'm sorry for that. I don't know. I think it's a bigger question than just what happens in the household.
Very important, very important. But I have to disagree with you. Yours was started when you were born in mm-hmm. your family. All those accumulation of education and this or that. It's a discipline. That was all started there. When you arrived at school, you had already had a grounding in so many of those basic things that many of these other kids, and I'll tell you another thing, and even in Palm Beach Day School, you could probably look at kids that were in your class, etc., that didn't have that grounding. Now, they might have come from families where money was there, but they didn't have those groundings. They didn't have them. Now, you should have said, well, it was the school's duty to imbue. True, I'll agree with you there. And sometimes we were successful, and sometimes we weren't. Sometimes, we've had, since I've been in this school, we've had, what is it, Barb, 9 deaths in drug overdoses?
Oh, my.
Yeah, 9.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that definitely did start for me at Palm Beach Day was technology. And I know that there's a lot working with Mrs. Close on that. I'm kind of curious if you've seen that impact your side of the school at all. Like, is the increased role of technology in our lives changing sort of the teaching of English and writing and, as we're talking about thinking?
Well, number one, I'm I'd come into to the computer in the room and I'd turn on and I'd get all my emails. I'd always get my emails. And then I'd go home and turn it off. And that's all I ever did with a computer. The only reason we're talking here is Mrs. Close. Otherwise, I couldn't do any. I didn't do anything. I don't even own a computer. Mrs. Greco passed away 3 years ago. She had a computer, but I got rid of it. I don't even have one at home. Okay. But I tell the kids, you must master this thing. Must master this thing.
Yeah.
Because this is going to be your life. You are in it. So learn it now. And in our school here, people like Mrs. Close, they do a great job. They do a great job with technology.
They do.
I can tell you what, after I leave, because she's going to get you in the end for a little bit, she can tell you what they do here. From what I can see, my ignorance, it's very impressive.
I believe it. I think it was impressive even back when we were working with Logo Writer, back in the early 90s. Because, and I never would have thought that I would work in technology, and that's where I am. And I was bringing this back to, we were talking a little bit about empathy. I think the future careers in technology are all based on the ability to understand design and kind of human-centered, the softer side of technology, really. Those things that help people who aren't technologically inclined to master them. I think the people who get good at the interaction of anthropology and technology, I think that's really where a lot of the exciting stuff that's happening today, right? To make people who aren't chasing technology for technology's sake, but find it as an enabler for whatever else they want to do. And that was always where I struggled, from earliest days. I was, I almost failed kindergarten, I'm sure, at Palm Beach State from not being able to color inside the lines. And so to suddenly see that be the most important thing sort of in the field that I work in is, that's a fascinating evolution.
Oh, hey, listen, I'm going to kick off, I don't know how many more years I have, but one of the things I'm going to be sorry, because one of the big debates in science, technology, anthropology, etc. This whole idea, consciousness, what is consciousness? They're not agreed on what it is, or whether we have it or not. Just the same as we're talking about determinism. Is there free will? And if not, it's all in the brain, and etc. Are they going to be able to design computers that think? And if so, and there are many scientists who feel yes. And the question is, once that happens, would they be able to get control?
Generally,
I used to think this was science fiction and everything. No, I've been doing some reading. There are people that say, yes, this is possible. This is possible. What's the one in a very homely example, but the computer that defeated the great chess champ? What was that computer?
Yeah,
it defeated him.
Deep Blue, yeah, right?
Pardon?
The IBM one, right?
Yeah, they beat, what was his name? I forget his name. Koslov or something like that. So I think that's going to be and what they're doing with this intelligence, whatever it is. What is intelligence? I don't know.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, and I'm sure Cyrus knew more about this particular topic area than I do. But where computers really excel at thinking is, various forms of pattern matching, and they see patterns where even humans can't, right? But where they fall down is this concept of, understanding and empathy in terms of being able to grasp the emotive side of the human experience. And I don't know that they have the tools to get there, right? I think that the more that people focus on, on other humans' intentions, emotions, relationships, the more they're in a space that computers really struggle with, even with the best kind of artificial intelligence that we can build.
We'll see.
And a lot of it comes back to literature, right? Which is, starting with you, learning that side of the brain is really so far something that humans can't be touched on.
You know, it would always fascinate me that I didn't realize until I was doing some in biology here in our brain, there is what, 100 billion neurons.
Yeah.
Billion. My first question was, Richard asked my friend, how could they count? How do you count? How can you count 100 billion cells?
Yeah.
They have ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Imagine
It's magical. And the best computers they've come up with, they basically started saying, how does the human brain work? And let's try to mimic that.
yeah.
Right. And that's been all the latest advances in computing have been, you know, what they're calling neural networks, which is basically like, let's start from the prospect of understanding what a neuron is and see if we can build a software that looks like that.
And how the message is sent, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And they did one interesting experiment. They had a lot of controversy over it, on this idea of autonomous man, that you make the choice about you want your finger to rise, and they timed when the message went from this part of the brain,
mm-hmm.
then to the message here, and
mm-hmm.
they assumed that the decision came first. You decide to do this,
mm-hmm.
then this, and they did these experiments, and before you decided to do that,
mm-hmm.
it's already done.
Mm.
The brain had already done it on your past experience. I know it's just mind-boggling. Imagine, and you and Barbara understand these, but imagine to someone who's almost completely ignorant of any of this, what it is to me to see some of these things.
Yeah, rationalization is a powerful tool that we have at our disposal. You know, why that's a decision I made, and not why that's something that that happened and later I told myself a story.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you.
You got to promise me that when you do get to town the next time,
when the plague is lifted,
you give me a call before you get here.
Yeah.
We can make a lunch or a dinner date, okay?